Have you ever had a bias against a wine? You know, a white wine, a red wine, certain kind of varietal? Well, we have to eliminate them. Also, blind tasting and a kick-ass Pinot Gris from British Columbia. All that and so much more on this episode of The Average Wine Enthusiast. Hi there, everybody. My name's Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. On this episode, we are going to be talking about Ontario wine. Why is that? Well, this episode was inspired by a list of all things. I'm not a big fan of lists, top 10 guitarists in the world, the 10 best cars to drive. The list I'm talking about came from a publication, a wine group called VineRoutes. They're relatively new on the scene, basically consist of a bunch of wine writers. You can check them out online, and they talk about different wine regions, different wines, the whole wine industry, basically. They're a proponent of the wine industry, which I'm all for that, really, because the wine industry can use all the help it can get, especially during these times right now. So in the last few years since they've been an entity, they've come out with these lists. And the one that I saw recently was the top 20 Ontario wineries for 2023. All these lists usually come out at the year end or at the beginning of the next year. So theirs is no exception. So we saw that there was 20 wineries that they picked as the top 20. Much to my surprise, they picked 3 wineries from the Lake Erie North Shore, which is very close to where I live. I live in Windsor, Ontario, as many of you know, and it's not a very long drive to get to the wine region known as Lake Erie North Shore. Of course, in Ontario, we have 2 other wine regions. There's the Niagara region, which makes up the bulk of the wineries in the province. And then, of course, there is Prince Edward County. So there was 3 from Lake Erie North Shore on the list and 1 from Prince Edward County, which was Clawson Chase, by the way, which I'm a big fan of. Beautiful Pinots and Chardonnays coming out of Clawson Chase. And then the rest of them, which was 16 of them, if you do the math, came from the Niagara region. So this surprised me that 3 came from this area here. Because do you know how many wineries there are in Ontario? If you said 180-ish, you'd be right. So that's a good chunk of wineries to have in this province. Mind you, it is a large province, but they're pretty much concentrated in the Niagara region. I think there's 18 wineries here in the Lake Erie North Shore. So it surprised me. Now, why did it surprise me that 3 of the 180 came from these few 18 wineries that are here? It's because I live here and I'm a wine enthusiast and I sample all the wine around here. I want to say there's one winery I haven't been to, and that's Mastronardi. And I have my reasons for that, I guess. But for the most part, I have some idea of what the winery produces out here, I thought. So at some point, we all develop biases. There's a plural for the word bias, and they're all too common. I can't drink white wine, or California wine is just too rich for me, or whatever. There's these biases that we get based on past experiences, and as we get farther from those experiences, the generalizations tend to increase. So my generalization that was increased from the wineries in Lake Erie North Shore was that we did not produce very good wine. Now, there is one winery here that I love their entire portfolio, and that's Musedri. And they're somewhat separate from the majority of the wineries that are closer to the shore. They're kind of more inland, and I'm sure that has something to do with the quality of their wine. So, did I have a bias against some of the wines that are coming out of Lake Erie North Shore? Absolutely. So that's where my surprise came from when I saw this list from VineRoutes naming 3 of the wineries from here. So I commented on their Facebook post about this list, saying, I realize that you're making this list not based solely on the quality of the wine. There's a lot of other things to consider. There's the way you grow the grapes, the facility itself. Did they hire a nice chef? There's just a lot of criteria that they could follow to create this list, of which I didn't think the quality of the wine was necessarily ranked very high in that criteria. So they shot back to me and said, you know what? We think that the wine is good in Lake Erie North Shore. Why don't you do a blind tasting with wines from Lake Erie North Shore and wines from elsewhere, like the ones that were on the list that are from Niagara and Prince Edward County? I thought that was a fantastic idea. So that's what I did. I shot out to the Lake Erie North Shore and stopped at the 3 wineries that were on the list. They are Cooper's Hawk, North 42, and Crew, which stands for Colchester Ridge Estate Winery. But I don't think they use that moniker anymore. So we stopped in first at Cooper's Hawk. They gave us a great tasting. I think her name was Jen, and she was very pleasant. And we came out of there after, my criteria for this blind taste test was that it had to be a single varietal for me to easily match up winery against winery, Niagara against Lake Erie North Shore. If you have a blend, you're not going to find necessarily the same blend somewhere else, obviously. So the single varietal we came out of Cooper's Hawk with was their Riesling, dry Riesling. Then we went over to Crew and we met with Frank, and he's the owner there, and he started talking me into their Chardonnay. Like, he went to the extent to warm up a glass because the Chardonnay was sitting in a bucket of ice, and he wanted to make sure I was drinking it at the right temperature. But then we started talking about their Fumé Blanc. So I think he wanted to give me the Fumé Blanc. It was like he had a thought, well, maybe you'd rather have this because I think we did a really good job for whatever vintage he was going to give me. But then I said, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find a Fumé Blanc from Niagara that easily. So that got us talking about Sauvignon Blanc. So that's what he ended up giving me. So we kind of didn't really, zone in on one specific wine. We kind of hovered over a few of them. And so he gave me a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, and he also gave me a bottle of their flagship red blend, which was awful nice of him. Obviously I told him I couldn't use it, but I will definitely be trying that wine and giving a review of Crew's Bordeaux blend. And another side note, they were the only winery that actually gave me the wine, gratis, as it were. Then we headed over to North 42, which is literally right next door. Why is that? Because Colchester Ridge Estate Winery was owned by this couple, I believe, and they gave it to their 2 sons, Frank being one of the sons, and Martin was the other son, and he started North 42, which of course is the line of latitude that many of the wineries are on over there. And so we stopped and saw Martin. Martin's a character, I'll tell you. He's extremely intelligent. He's like a Vigneron. He knows every single aspect of winemaking, plus he knows so much about a lot of other things. I think he's got his doctorate in chemistry, if I'm not mistaken. And he did not hesitate to pass his knowledge along to us, along with all his wine as well. He was very generous with the tasting there. So I eventually asked him, what's the best wine? And he said, that's going to be my Cabernet Sauvignon from 2017, which wasn't anywhere near the bar. They had to go fetch it from some other part of the building, and then that's how I got it. That wine was $46, so it's kind of up there, right? So I knew that was also going to be hard to pair up with the Niagara single varietal Cabernet Sauvignon as well. That was on the VineRoutes list. But that's what I walked out of there with. So I have a Riesling, I have a Sauvignon Blanc, and I have a Cabernet Sauvignon that we blind tasted against the Niagara wines. Now, I got home and I was kind of hoping I'd have at least one of these wines, and I believe I had the Flat Rock Riesling in my fridge. So they were on the list, Flat Rock was, and we used that one. And then I had to go to the LCBO. So we found a Taos Sauvignon Blanc in the vintages section of the LCBO, which is the flagship store here in Windsor. And then there was no single varietal Cabernet Sauvignon in the vintages section from Ontario, let alone one that was on the list. So we had to go into the regular section of the Ontario. They have a section there specifically for Ontario wines, which is no bigger than the Chilean wine section. There's something wrong there when your name is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. So we found a Cabernet Sauvignon from Trius there, which I had never tried. I think it was a $20 bottle of wine, which I'm going to be pairing up against a $46 bottle of wine. Not much I could do about that. They were on the list, and this is the only single varietal I could find. I like Trius's Rosé, though. If you see that in your local wine store, I would recommend picking it up. It's very good. So we got our wines. Now we need to drink them blindly. We need some judges. So I belong to what is known as a dinner club. We call ourselves the Sunday Fun Day crew. And if you don't belong to one of these yourself, I highly suggest you get together with some friends. If you're that kind of person that is into food or making food, and you like drinking wine, you like pairing it up, it's always fun to get together with some other folks. And what we do is we rotate amongst our homes, and usually the host of the home is making the main dish, and then someone else will bring a side dish or a vegetable or a salad or an appetizer of some kind, and then everybody usually brings wine, and then that's the fun of it, right? So that was going to be the judges for the blind tasting of these wines, was the Sunday Fun Day crew, and there was 8 of us on this particular day, because every week it varies on who can make it and who can based on our schedules. And so 8 is a pretty good turnout. I mean, I can't imagine doing more than that, because houses are only so big. And so we started with the Riesling. So the Flat Rock went up against the Cooper's Hawk Riesling, and what I did is I made some ballots up, and I told people what to look for in each varietal. So, some people may not know what they're tasting, or their palate just can't distinguish one thing from another. So, giving people a list of flavors to look for, notes, as it were, then they would be able to see if one was lacking, or, the acidity, dryness, and all that kind of stuff. So, with the Riesling, the vote count was 5 for the Cooper's Hawk and 3 for the Flat Rock. Ding, one for Essex County wine, which is somewhat surprising. But I have to admit that of all the wines we tasted at Cooper's Hawk, and I think she gave us like 10, 11 wines to choose from, the Riesling was definitely a standout. So no, I shouldn't say no surprise that it won, but good on them. Awesome. So then next we tried the Sauvignon Blanc. So that was the Cru Sauvignon Blanc against the Taos Sauvignon Blanc. And that was also 5-3, but that was for Taos. So we got 1 for Niagara, 1 for Essex County. So now we have this matchup of Cabernet Sauvignons. One was a $46 bottle of wine, and it was, what is that, like 6-7 years old. And then we had the Trius, $20 bottle of wine. So it's tough, obviously, for the Trius, to be matched, to match it up, unless, of course, Essex County wine isn't all that good. However, that wasn't the case. I think it was, that wasn't 5-3. I want to say it was 6-2. And what we did is we had that red wine with our main dish. Up to that point, we were eating, just appetizers and crackers and stuff. But those Cabernet Sauvignons were side by side while we were eating we were having osso buco, a meat dish, and it was delicious. and we paired that up with it, and it was 6-2 for the North 42 Cabernet Sauvignon. Ding, 2 for Essex County, 1 for Niagara. So there you go. Throw your biases away and try to be more open-minded about wine in general. And kudos to VineRoutes for inspiring this show to get done and get produced, and try to open some people's minds and try to make people more open-minded. So what do I got here? Definitely not Ontario wine. This is a wine from Deep Roots, which is on the Naramata Bench, which is the last place you saw me on the last episode. Actually, I was across the lake, but I used to be a member at Deep Roots, and I visited there a couple times. Great winery, small family, the Hardmans. And this is a wine that they only made 71 cases of. It's a Pinot Gris that they call rhododendron, which is the flower that I believe is color penciled on the front of the wine, and on the back of the bottle is the label that gives you all the information, including the name of the wine and the name of the winery too. So it's a Pinot Gris that has got to hang out on the skins for a little bit longer, so you get a little more color in there, and a little more extraction from the skins as well, so you get a little more, well, let's find out. What do you get? We're getting some gooseberries and some lime, a certain kind of like wet gravel smell. Let's give it a taste. Yeah, not super acidic, but a beautiful acidity in there. Some minerality. Citrus for sure, a little bit of honeydew close to the rind. It's a delicious wine for sure. If you're used to Pinot Gris that are somewhat lighter, this may not be for you. But if you like a little in your Pinot Gris, this is definitely a wine that you should check out. Deep Roots Wine. Go on the internet and have them ship you some wine. They ship me this wine. I think if you order a case, you get it for free. Shipped to Ontario, which is crazy. I mean, what a value. Wine shows up at your door from across the country, and it's beautiful, delicious wine from the Naramata Bench. I guess that's going to do it for this episode. I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you know anybody else who is like you, who watches videos on YouTube about wine, turn them on to the average wine enthusiast. I'd really appreciate it. Also like to thank the Big Organ Trio for letting me use their music on the show. Until next time, my name is Mike LaPlante, and I'm the average wine enthusiast. Salut!